Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this webinar today. We're going to go over IDEA and the impacts on your business. So just go over some housekeeping with everybody. Just a heads up, all participants are muted. For technical issues, use the chat function. And for any questions, can be submitted through the chat access question box as well. And a recording of this webinar will be sent out to all registrants within 24 hours after the webinar is finished. So the traditional land acknowledgement. Eco-Canada and myself would like to recognize today and every day the land we are on. Eco-Canada is committed to reconciliation starts with acknowledging our honor and privilege to live and work within this Indigenous territory. Eco-Canada acknowledges the traditional territories and oral practices of these nations. A little bit about Eco-Canada and who we are. Eco-Canada is the steward of the Canadian environmental workforce across all industries. We champion the end-to-end career of an environmental professional. We not only train and certify professionals, but we also help identify and address labor market gaps. Our efforts to promote and drive responsible, sustainable economic growth to ensure that environmental care and best practices is a priority. Now I'm going to hand it over to Andrew. Andrew, take it away.
Thanks, Chase. Thanks for the intro. So I'm really happy to be here today, everyone. So it's really nice to meet you. My name is Andrew Janzik. I'm a recruiter and HR professional at Eco-Canada. So before we get into a little bit more about the content of today's course, which is an exciting kind of DEI course for business strategy, I'll just tell you a little bit more about myself. So I do come from a background of post-secondary HR at the University of Calgary. I came over to Eco-Canada in September of 2022 as a recruiter and HR consultant. I'm passionate about providing the best recruitment process possible to all candidates. So I think it's really important to kind of have these DEI strategies in place so that everyone is experiencing the best, kind of most fair and equitable recruitment process possible. So that's kind of what I'm all about. And I love to do training. I love to grow and learn myself as I'm doing the training. So as we're having this discussion today, it's really more about learning and growing and discussing with each other, even though we are in a bit of a more formal webinar type of setup. We can't have those conversations, but I do want you to think about those conversations like we would be having them if we were more in person. So what we will cover today. So basically today we are looking at IDEA, which we will get into in more detail. IDEA is basically a DEI term. So a lot of people are familiar with DEI, and we will talk about that. But I did want to have a quick little preface here and just say that DEI can be broken down into a lot of different acronyms these days. You might see IDEA like we have, you might see EDI, you might see JEDI, you might see all kinds of different acronyms that basically kind of mean the same idea. So IDEA, no pun intended, but ours stands for inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. So a DEI strategy that small to medium-sized businesses can use to really kind of make sure that their hiring practices and their practices within their organization are promoting a diverse and equitable workforce. So we're going to look at that, kind of what is IDEA. We're going to touch on some of the more theoretical sides of things in the first part of this PowerPoint and webinar. And then we'll get into a little bit more of the tangible takeaways. So we're going to look first at intersectionality and unconscious bias, and then we'll get into IDEA checklists for your business. So 5 sort of checklists that I've created and that we've created at Eco-Canada so that you can kind of take those with you. They're available on our website, and you can kind of go through different areas of your business and say, yep, we're doing that well, or maybe, nope, we need to have a look at this area. And then hopefully we'll have a good time at the end having a little discussion about how to move forward and how to implement some of these strategies. I'd love to be able to open it up for questions at the end. We do have a lot of content to cover, so it's good that we've got about a nice chunk of time together. I will try to make it as interactive as possible, but again, it is a webinar, so we have a few questions. But other than that, I really appreciate your attention. So while we get into it, I think it's important to highlight some of the conversation rules. So again, this topic can be fairly sensitive. It's a lot of people have different opinions on it. A lot of people have studied different areas on it, or maybe somebody might not know anything about it. So there's a lot of different understanding on the topic itself. So I want to make sure that everything we say in this webinar is confidential. We're coming to it from a place where we're not judging, we're trying to grow, which shows here. So it's about growth, it's about learning, and it's about implementing these strategies into your business so that you can actually increase your ROI and increase, some of your revenue and sales as well, and just through thought engagement. And again, engaging. So just be here, be engaged as much as you can. Trying to kind of follow along the slides and listen to what I'm saying, and kind of thinking about what I'm saying in terms of your business. And then just being present, making sure that you are in the room, and again, engaged. And I like how I put a little present there just as a joke, because the gift is the webinar. So just be present. So on the next slide, I'd like to kind of open it up for everybody to kind of think about where they're coming at DEI from. So I've asked the question here, how familiar are you with DEI business strategies? And we'd love to have you vote just so that I can kind of get an idea. So I am an expert, I have a working knowledge, I've heard of DEI strategies before, or DEI, what's that? So let's take a vote and just kind of see where everybody's at in terms of their understanding of DEI business strategies. We'll give you a couple minutes for that, or a couple seconds.
So right now we're looking at 55% have working knowledge, 35% have I've heard of the DEI strategies before, and 13% are saying DEI. What is that?
Oh, okay. So great. Good to know. So nobody's an expert in here, including myself. That's good. So no A's. We all have lots of knowledge to gain from this. We have a few B's, so in working knowledge, that's really good. How can you improve this strategy session? We'll touch on some stuff that you've probably heard of, but hopefully you can take some more tangible takeaways, especially the checklists at the end where you'll have that that you can take into your business strategy planning. I've heard of DEI strategies before, good. So, we'll touch on a little bit more. And then the DEI, what's that? 13%, awesome. So we're gonna touch right at the beginning here on the theory, discuss what it is, why it's important, and some of the kind of more theoretical things behind it. And then hopefully you can also take some of the tangibles at the end. So great, good to know. Okay, so let's hop right into it. So what is IDEA? And I already spoiled it a little bit, but IDEA stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility. And I think it's important to note that this concept isn't new. It stems from the civil rights and social justice movements of the 1950s and 1960s, or kind of mid 1900s. So, a lot of that time is when those social concepts were starting to come into play. I think what really is important for our session today is to kind of see how those concepts play into today's business strategy. How do inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, how are they essential for organizational success in today's world? And because of the diverse and global network of our world today, it is essential. I can definitely tell you that. But how do we do it and how do we implement it? So that's kind of our goal today, is to discuss some of those things. So common language that you'll hear, and especially today, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. So we'll start off with inclusion. And inclusion basically just means that you're creating an organizational culture where people feel comfortable to be themselves and to bring their differences to the table. So that's where they feel that they're valued and welcome and, part of the crew, I guess, and not just left out. And I know from a personal standpoint, this is huge. Like if you've ever been in a boardroom or in an office space where you don't feel included, you don't feel welcome. So you definitely know that feeling. Inclusion is necessary, especially for a diverse workforce, because it ensures that everyone, no matter who they are, is heard and able to contribute to the workforce, so contributing their ideas. When you have inclusive culture, employees are more likely to bring their authentic selves to work, and you're more likely to get better, more creative ideas from them. So inclusion is kind of our first main point there of what we're looking at. Next, we're going to move on to diversity, just as a definition. So diversity encompasses, oh no, sorry, we can stay on the other slide still. Or no, actually, yes, sorry, you could have gone to that. We'll go on to the next slide, I think is, sorry, stay on the previous slide if you don't mind, Chase, with the all four, yeah, diversity, that one, thank you. So we'll talk about diversity and basically all the ways in which people are different and how including those visible differences is essential in the workforce as well. So this is including but not limited to race, ethnicity, gender, culture background, class, religion, sexual orientation, disability, language, and life experiences. So this is all the way that people are different and diverse. And these differences shape who we are as human beings, and they influence our ideas and our perspectives. So everybody is diverse and has different ideas and perspectives. Equity refers to working towards fair treatment. So as a definition, equity means fair, basically the fair treatment, access, and opportunity for all people by striving to identify and eliminate systemic or individual barriers that prevent the full participation and engagement of groups and individuals. So we'll definitely go through equity in more detail coming up, kind of focus more on inclusion, equity, and that in the next couple of slides. But you'll get an idea for what equity is and how it differs from equality. And there's a big difference. And then finally, we have accessibility. And accessibility refers to the design of products, devices, services, or environments for people who experience disabilities. So when we're talking about accessibility, we need to understand that there are barriers that can take all kinds of different forms. So it could be attitudinal, it could be a communication barrier, a physical barrier, a policy barrier, programmatic, social, transportation, all of those are barriers that people face. And this is why accessibility is really important in the workforce, and especially for small businesses and medium-sized businesses, because I think it's really important to start increasing the diverse, the diverse work group behind it. So we discussed kind of what inclusion is. I just want you to take a moment and think, when you think of the word inclusion, what comes to mind? So, what are you thinking of when you think of inclusion? Is it something that is more personal? Is it something that is business related? So just have a quick think for a minute. So for me, I think, as I talked about, the biggest thing about inclusion, and one of the reasons it's so important, is because it kind of houses all of those other kind of topics that we're going to discuss. So it's a practice of creating an environment where everyone feels equally valued and respected by their individuality. So, inclusive environments where people can feel fully engaged, like my example earlier, where, somebody was, maybe I myself was in an office or a boardroom and I felt like I was not part of that crew or not included, then it's really hard to have your ideas heard and to really kind of be your authentic self at work. So that's why that's, such an important topic for what we're discussing today. On the next slide, I wanted to discuss what equity is. And equity is a very important concept in kind of what we're learning today, because it varies greatly from equality. So a lot of people know that equality kind of means, each individual or group of people is given the same resources and the same opportunities. So each individual, that it's there, it's possible. So a great example for this is a job posting, let's say in recruitment. You've posted a job on a website and you've said, okay, my hands are clean, I've posted that, everybody has an equal opportunity to apply. The difference here between equality and equity is that equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and then allocates the exact resources and opportunities that are needed to reach an equal outcome. So it's actually going a step further and saying, okay, I've posted this job in the last example, I've posted this job, but how do I get it out to more of these equity deserving groups or these people who are traditionally marginalized? So let's say one example would be posting jobs online and then not reaching certain demographics that don't have access to computers. So let's say very rural demographics, especially in the environmental sector. We could have First Nations or people that are working up north and don't have access to Wi-Fi all the time like we do in Calgary or Edmonton. So really important to kind of know the difference between that equality and equity. So we'll talk a little bit about how equity comes into play and why it's important for organizations, especially small and medium-sized ones, to really ensure that their hiring practices are equitable. And we'll touch on some of the ROI on that too. Equity in action. So equity is a solution for addressing imbalanced social systems, and justice can take equity one step further by fixing the system. So the end goal is justice. I don't know if that's a utopian type phrase maybe right now, but the goal would be justice, and we are working towards that justice. So that's kind of the goal. So yeah, if you go to the next slide. I really love this little infographic or a little comic because it shows it kind of shows the difference between equality and equity really, really well, and then adds in, your reality and justice. So on the far left, you've got reality, and you've got one person who's watching the baseball game. They're way up high. They have a great view. Another person, just above the fence, and then one person that's actually dug down in a trench and they can't see anything. So that's sort of the reality of what, people are facing in terms of systemic barriers in our systems. So this is kind of a metaphor, obviously, but if you look at equality, then we have equal sized boxes. So everybody does have an equal sized box, which is great. Something's been recognized, there's a problem here, and we're going to give everybody an equal sized box. But one person's tall, one person's medium size, and one person's really short. So the tall person has an unfair way of seeing the game, and some people might say, well, that's life, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to avoid, right? We want it to be equitable. So the next kind of picture over shows that everyone gets the support they need. Sorry, we're not quite yet. Thanks, Chase. So everyone gets the support they need. So we've got the tall person can see fine, the box, one box person, the medium-sized person can see fine, and then the short person has the support they need to be able to see the game. And then if we go one step further, like I was just saying, justice is when all the barriers are removed. So the fence is completely down. Now, obviously in baseball, there's a fence, so that might change the game. I don't know, but I guess that's kind of the point, is we're trying to change the game. So that's kind of a great infographic anyway, I think. So yeah, next slide. Good. Thanks, Chase. So now that we have a little bit of an understanding of what IDEA is and kind of just the very basic definitions of some of these things in DEI. So DEI, if you've ever heard the word DEI, we're basically just using diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then not including accessibility. And people can continue adding words, letters, but it's the same sort of idea. So we just use IDEA as an acronym. But it's essential as we kind of go through the next few slides and continue to discuss this topic that we understand intersectionality. So As it says here, intersectionality is the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and oppression. And this literally means everyone. Now they're differing, they're very, they could be on one spectrum, one side of the spectrum and the other, it could be whatever, but they're all differing. And there's no set, kind of rules around it. But basically the idea here is that intersecting kind of identities come together to create an individual. So experiences differ, greatly depending on individuals' backgrounds, where they're from, what they've done. But this idea was first coined by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. And it acknowledges that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and oppression, as I mentioned. So there are multiple forms of inequality or disadvantage that can compound themselves and create obstacles that are not understood in conventional ways of thinking and can also be based on example. And that can also be based on, for example, the intersection of gender, race, class, sexual orientation, or physical abilities. So basically, all of these different kind of variables will intersect and kind of create how you kind of see the world. And obviously this is very complex. It's not something that is just easy to determine. In fact, I'm sure psychologists out there might even be some in the crowd today would have a lot better tips than I would on it. But in the business world, understanding intersectionality is an important part of practicing inclusion because it defines how different facets of identity contribute to our unique perspective and team participation, as well as the ways in which different types of discrimination overlap with one another. So understanding these different intersections can allow us to kind of navigate some of these conversations that might be difficult, or policies that might be difficult, and just understanding these different overlapping kind of intersections is essential. So this is just an example on the next slide of an intersectional lens. So in this one example, you could be a person of color, a woman, have a mental health issue or a disability, and be a part of a 2S LGBTQ+ community. So there's 4 overlapping intersections there. Based on these interactions, you'd find a way, you would face a lot more barriers than you would if you didn't have as many intersections. So that's just a fact. I mean, like based off of a lot of different labor market research and based off of all of our studies, that these intersections of these variables do create barriers. So having those 4 overlapping kind of intersections would create a lot more barriers than if you didn't have those. So now that we kind of understand how and where we're thinking and why we're thinking that way in terms of our intersections, and obviously again you can go into way more detail about it, but what does this mean, and what does bias mean basically? So how does bias come out of that intersectionality? So bias is a strong inclination of the mind or a preconceived opinion about something or someone. So a bias could be favorable or it could be unfavorable. So you might have a bias in favor of your favorite team or against your favorite team's enemy. Or so I'm not going to name any team names being from Calgary, but I'm sure you can kind of extrapolate my sports there. So, but basically our bias and that also comes from our intersectional kind of lens and where we're coming from. So when we're looking at bias, I think for this purpose, the most interesting one and kind of the most essential one to review is unconscious bias and the role that it plays in the decisions we make. So unconscious bias is also known as implicit bias. And this refers to the attitudes, stereotypes, or prejudices that people hold at a subconscious level. It influences their decisions and behaviors without them being consciously aware of it. These biases are formed by our brains making quick judgments and associations based on past experiences, cultural upbringing, societal influences, media portrayals, and other factors. So again, that intersectionality and where we're getting our information helps to form this bias that we barely even know is happening. While bias is a normal part of human brain function, it can often reinforce stereotypes. So it can often kind of be like, yep, that's what I thought. And we'll talk about what kind of bias that is later. Implicit biases are developed over time as we accumulate life experiences and get exposed to different stereotypes. So, you know, the more you learn, the more you grow, that's great, but you also do learn in certain kind of categories and go in one way, and your bias kind of forms that way. So it's just good to be aware of that bias so you can help mitigate that. I think it's important to note that bias is biological and based on our experiences. So, you know, it's not something that that is just been created and input into our lives. It's something that we are fundamentally born with. We have it biologically. In fact, it's actually helped us evolution-wise kind of grow and the way that we perceive things. It kind of helps with that. But basically, the way that bias works is that it processes loads of information. So as you can see here, almost 11 million pieces of information are coming into your brain at any one time. So your brain can't really take all that data. Well, it can't really. It just cannot handle all that data. So I think there's 40 to 50 pieces of information that actually get absorbed at any time. This is just based off of scientific studies of the brain. So, you know, you're interpreting 40 to 50 pieces of 11 million pieces of data at any one given time. So that's a lot of information that's getting missed. So this is basically just saying that your interpretations, perceptions, preferences, and even attention to things is selected based off of what you're letting into your brain. So I think this was Google. When Google first embarked on its tracking unconscious bias journey, they estimated this. And it did say that it was 99.999996% unconscious, your brain, because that's how much is actually getting filtered out. So it's only like 0.00003% like conscious. So really that's the brain's way of navigating and categorizing all that information. But it's important to know that because then our brain is making assumptions based off of what it sees and expects to see as well, which is something that we call confirmation bias. So if you see something happen and you're like, yep, I knew that would happen based off of, you know, your assumptions, that's confirmation bias. And that can impact our decision making. So I think it's really important to know this, especially in a business environment, that when you're in an interview or when you're doing performance reviews or whatever it might be, whatever business function, you know, this is playing a role, even though it's not at the front of your brain, you know, it's actually going on behind the scenes. So what happens when we do this too is that we make implicit associations that operate beyond our control and awareness, and that are based on a mental model driven by life experiences and cultural conditioning rather than you know, what might actually be happening up front. So there's a lot more to it. Obviously, again, there is, I don't know if Chase can see the notes here. If you want to post this Harvard implicit association test in the chat, there is a chat here that you could, a test here that you can check out following the workshop, and it kind of shows attitudes and beliefs that people are unwilling or unable to report. So you can go into the Harvard implicit association test and kind of have a look at bias, kind of your own bias as well. So where do our biases come from? You know, this is a great question, and we chatted a little bit about this already, your kind of intersections and where your experiences are from, but let's take a kind of deeper look at it. So where do you think the biases would come from? And what would the main sources of biases be? I know, just thinking, obviously I know because I'm the presenter, but I think the biggest one and the one that comes to the top of my mind right away is the media. So, oh, we can go to the next slide. Sorry, Tracy. Yeah, perfect. Thanks. I think the media is a massive form of bias. So we're all on a wide variety of platforms, such as Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok. Even just news platforms, just whatever you're on, and those sites tend to reinforce our biases due to their algorithms. So they'll kind of see where we're going, and I'm sure you've seen it before. You've discussed it probably with friends, and you kind of get lost in this kind of rabbit hole of like search that just keeps going and going. But yeah, so media. Are you still there, Chase? Are we still on? Good. Nope, you can go back one. Perfect, thanks. Sorry about that. So, but basically we keep searching the same thing and keep doing the same thing. The algorithm will continue to read that and will really just kind of continue to perpetuate that bias. The people you have on your social media as well will influence that algorithm, and you'll kind of see, their comments all the time, which isn't a bad thing. They're your friends and family, but just knowing that that's one side of the picture. Same with news. I come from a background in political science early in my studies, and one of the first things you learn to look for in news is bias. It doesn't mean the news isn't relevant. It doesn't mean that it's not important. It just means that it's important to know where the source is being basically referenced from, or what source it's coming from. So it's always important to kind of look at that. What other types of things influence our bias? So our upbringing, we talked about that with intersectionality. Who are our parents, our teachers, our siblings, colleagues, friends? What have we surrounded ourselves with? This will again continue to kind of group us into different biases. I know as a kid, I always believed what my parents said was correct. And then I started being like, wait, that's not correct, right? So just biases in terms of how you're brought up and taught at a very young age as well. And then I don't think you can talk about where your biases come from without discussing instinct. And I discussed it a little bit earlier, but it's basically our evolution as humans. So to some extent, we all have biases that form our instinct. And from an evolutionary perspective, we develop these in order to survive, basically. So, you might see something dangerous off in the distance, and that's a bias, or you think it's dangerous, like in that tree over there. So you go the other way, right? So, those are just things that we're kind of grown, that are part of us inherently. And a lot of times, within seconds of seeing someone, we've judged them, and that's, the classic "don't judge a book by its cover." But I think it's very true that's super important, because we might have that judgment, but it's important to realize, oh, that's a bias. Let me kind of try to reel that back. Okay, so on the next slide, we have types of biases. And I don't know, again, this would be a great time if we were all in a room to kind of discuss if anybody's heard of different biases, but there are a lot of different types of biases. So we're going to focus on 5 main biases today. And on the next slide, the first one is affinity bias. So affinity bias is where we tend to have a good or great relationship with others who are like us. So an example of this would be if you're hiring a candidate who grew up in the same place, same community, attended the same schools, maybe went to the same university or college. And in the workplace, this can mean that you're not making business decisions based off of skills or competencies, but more off of personal attributes. So affinity bias is a huge one, especially in recruitment a lot of the time. The next bias is in-group bias. which is similar to infinity bias. So this type of bias refers to how people are more likely to support or believe someone within their own social group than an outsider. So it tends to remove objectivity from the business process, as individuals will favor those who they personally know and who they want to help. This happens a lot with retention, performance management, succession within an organization, that kind of thing. So in-group bias is definitely at play there a lot. Another example would be preferring to socialize with people that are, fans of your favorite team. So fans of the Oilers or fans of the Flames, but you don't want to hang out with somebody that's a Leafs fan, for example, or something like that. Congregating with your own age group is another example. So, kind of ageism there, and then hanging out with people that are just in your age group. Those are just examples of in-group bias. And in-group bias is a big component of prejudice and discrimination. It leads people to basically extend extra privileges to people that they, are in their group while denying those same courtesies to others, which basically creates inequality right off the start. The next bias that we'll discuss is confirmation bias, and we did talk a little bit about this already. Basically, this tendency to seek out information that supports you, something that you already believe in. So, when we see something with limited information and limited understanding of what's happening, we fill in the blanks based off of our experiences and our beliefs. So we're kind of filtering that data based off of our beliefs. A great example would be if you have a youngster on your team or a younger person on your team, and you believe that they don't have the experience or qualifications to assist you on a project. And let's say you go to ask questions that are specifically designed to kind of seek out the answer that you're already looking for. So you've kind of preloaded questions and you want that you share that information with them, and then their answers are like not satisfactory for what you need, and then you're saying, yeah, that confirms it, so that's confirmation bias. Again, these things they come up, but that they're not, it's just important to know that they're there. You're not going to be able to totally eliminate them from your thoughts. So perception bias is the next one, and then there's one more after that. So the perception bias is the way that you think or understand someone or something, and the ability to understand or notice something easily. So again, relating to all that data coming into your brain, how is it coming in and what perceptions are you allowing to come in? So one example would be a team member who doesn't invite another team member to an after-work social event because they assume that they wouldn't share similar interests with the group. So you're perceiving that that person, let's say we were all going to do karaoke after work, and you're like, oh, so-and-so is quiet, I'm not going to invite them. Maybe they love karaoke, but you just assume that they don't, and that's your perception. And then finally, one that we're all a little more familiar with, I think, is gender bias. So we hear a lot about gender bias. This is huge in the workforce and in business in general, I would say. And in terms of business strategy, which is kind of what we're talking about today, I think one of the best ones to kind of tackle, and still we have a huge issue with gender bias. So this is obviously the tendency to prefer one gender over another. And it is a form of unconscious bias a lot of the times. It could be conscious as well, but which occurs when one individual unconsciously attributes certain attributes and stereotypes to another person or group of people. So basically, I think gender bias, because it's very common in the workforce, and we've kind of been dealing with it more so in the last 20 years, is one that I think we'll kind of look at more of the numbers. So on the next slide, if you look at some of the underrepresentation in the workforce, and this comes from a McKinsey info pool in 2022. And it shows, I believe this is North American data. So it shows North American data for the percentage of white men versus men of color versus white women versus women of color. So you can see the intersectionality kind of getting more and more as we go down, right? So if you look at this, you can see white men at entry-level positions are 33% more likely or in that position. Men of color 19%, white women 29%, and then women of color 19%. And then if you go up in terms of the position and you start getting closer to C-suite, so manager, director, VP, senior VP, and then C-suite, which is CEO, and I guess president. So it gets worse. So you can just see the data go: white men 41, director 47, VP 54, all the way up to C-suite. 61% are white men. So, you know, this really shows where our gaps are in terms of gender bias and gender, the role that gender plays in today's workforce. So, you know, I don't have an answer for it right now, unfortunately, but I do think this training, not just this training, but just being in these types of trainings help to grow awareness. They help to kind of perpetuate, not perpetuate, they help to kind of try to stem that back a little bit. I think as women become more involved in these higher level roles, hopefully there will be more mentorship, more guidance there. So I think we are starting to see some improvement there, but it's still very underrepresented. Final one, just a little bit more that has another little number. Next slide, sorry, Chase. So white sounding names on resumes are 75% more likely to get an interview than identical resumes with Asian sounding names. So this is impacting recruitment. 50% more likely to get an interview than identical resumes with Black sounding names. 25% more likely to get an interview than resumes with Latino sounding names. And then 40% of resumes with male names are more likely to get an interview than female names. So again, just highlighting how these things really impact, especially the recruitment process, and why it's so important for us to kind of be aware of what's happening. On the next slide, we have another question. So before Chase kind of gets into that, I just wanted to highlight that that's sort of the main theoretical portion of our discussion today. And I know it's a lot. So if anybody has questions about that, I'm happy to either answer them after, or you can always reach out you know, to me at Eco Canada. We've got more training, more development on all of that kind of stuff. That was a pretty quick overview, but kind of something that I thought was really important to kind of go into the next section, which is how do we actually implement this stuff into our business. So thanks for that. That's a lot of theory and a lot of and I enjoy it because I think it's important, but it is pretty deep stuff. So thanks. So now what we'll do is ask the quick question and kind of start looking at it from more of a business standpoint. So which business function should IDEA strategies target in your organization? So the thing here to note is that there's no right answer here. This is just kind of based off of your organization. It's totally just a kind of head start for you to kind of get a thinking about it. So do you think it would be recruitment and selection, retention of employees, performance management and succession planning, so having them, you know, performing performance management discussions and that kind of thing, or training and development? So just have a thought about that, or maybe it's something that's not even on this list, and that's fine too. This is more just to kind of get you thinking. So I'll let you kind of select those, and then when you're ready, Chase, you can let me know. How are we doing there?
Perfect. So we're sitting at 53 for recruitment and selection, 12% performance management, and 35% training and development. We did also have someone else answer saying he can't answer this poll because he thinks all of them are the right answer.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, no, all of them is a great answer too. And luckily we have checklists for all of them. So that's great. And I'm glad to see, you know, people thinking about it from their organization's perspective as well. You know, all of them are definitely important. What I would maybe recommend is to bite one off at a time. So I think it's good to start somewhere, and recruitment and selection is a great place to start. Maybe you already have that in place in your organization, and now you're thinking more performance management. But definitely, you know, thinking about where that kind of fits into your organization and how to really start it is kind of the initial step that I'm trying to kind of get you to think about. But all is a great answer. I do like that. So on the next slide, I just wanted to discuss the 5 categories that I think are most important kind of within your business, especially small to medium-sized business. These are things that you can really kind of hone in on. It's going to be different in a large organization. For anyone that works in a multinational, you know, huge organization, they have a lot more money usually to have HRIS systems and stuff in place that you know, are easier to work with data as long as you have people trained to work with that data. But this is really, I think, more tangible for small to medium size in the environmental sector, especially. And you know, we have these checklists on our website. So I'm not sure if Chase, we can maybe post it after. I don't know if you know where it is, Chase, but it's on the ECO website. I'll post it after at the end for questions for sure. But it's a great link to these different checklists on these business strategies. So this would be a great place to also start as a kind of DEI or idea audit. So you can look into kind of your own kind of processes and policies that you have in place for DEI. We are personally doing it at ECO ourselves as well, just because it's always great to review and to kind of update with the changing, you know, things always change as people learn and grow, and practices and policies need to change too. So, you know, this is just a good audit for any organization in small to medium size, I think. So think about the why as we're going through these categories. So why is it an issue, and why is it important for business strategy? What's the ROI? How does it impact the organization? So when we're kind of going through recruitment, retention, training and development, performance management, and business development, very broad. I'm sure I could do a course on each one. So, you know, we'll try to kind of touch on it really quickly, but these checklists can kind of help guide you too. Okay, so we'll hop right into it and talk about recruitment. We know I talked a lot about recruitment kind of in my theory portion as well. As a recruiter, I really enjoy recruitment. I think that it's super important. So, you know, why is having DEI or idea policies in place important in recruitment? So it creates a diverse, equitable, and inclusive recruitment process, which in turn builds a more representative and effective workforce. So you know, you're going to have a lot more people with different backgrounds, different intersectionalities, creating a lot more content, different ideas. You know, you don't have to use all ideas, but there's just more to choose from. So it's really important from a business strategy side to have that kind of diversification when you're have employees, right? So some of the key points that our idea recruitment checklist will highlight and that you can go through are focused around job postings, which we talked about a little bit already, candidate sourcing, where the candidates are coming from, the application process, how to make sure that's accessible, the screening and selection of candidates, so you know, how to avoid being biased during that stage, feedback and communication, and data collection and analysis. And data collection and analysis, I'd say, is more for organizations with HRIS systems or, you know, really strong analytics team, but it can be tricky. Okay, so the next checklist that we have is on retention. And it sounds like nobody answered retention for the question in the poll, which is interesting. I think retention is massive. I think a lot of money is spent on recruitment and not enough on retention. So retention is really important because it helps by keeping your diverse and equitable employees, and making sure that the workplace isn't just about, filling out the DEI checklist for hiring, but also about supporting those employees once they're working, and having policies in place that do support those employees. So, while the full kind of idea retention checklist is more comprehensive, I kind of wanted to touch on a few little points that are key to kind of business strategy in terms of retention. And they kind of center around creating that inclusive work environment. So really focusing on anti-discrimination policies, cultural awareness training. Now, obviously, some of these things could cost money or could, but even just having the idea there is good, and kind of saying, we support this policy, or we support training around cultural awareness and communication. Employee surveys and feedback are great. People want to be heard. So trying to kind of really feel that their ideas are making a difference in the workplace. Those are the employees that are going to stay long term. Employee assistance programs, if you're able to. So, having a provider that they can call for consulting or anything like that. And then obviously recognition and rewards, I think, is huge too. People want to feel rewarded for their work. So it doesn't have to be monetary. It could be, just an achievement award, and you go and the team has, a little bit of a celebration for a job well done or something like that. But I think that really helps retain employees, and then making sure that those rewards are kind of set to a diverse group of employees, not just a certain type. So, so-and-so loves Taylor Swift, but somebody else doesn't. We're going to get Taylor Swift concert tickets for everybody because that's in-group bias again, or affinity bias. So just really making sure that you're kind of aware of those things. The next checklist that we have is for training and development. And again, super, super important for internal. And I liked, you guys had a lot of, I think we had, I can't remember the exact number, but there was a lot that did training and development. So this is a little bit deeper into your sort of DEI or idea kind of training. And this checklist can, well, I guess understanding why it's important is because having a diverse, equitable, and inclusive training and development program can help foster a workplace culture that supports employee growth. So you really want to make sure that you're supporting different training programs, different types of learning where employees feel that they're developing in their career. And again, that ties in with retention too. Employees that feel like they're doing a good job and that are feel supported in whatever their skill set is. Again, diverse, different skill sets. So, you want to be open to these different things. Some people might want to do more accounting type courses. Other people might want to do like Toastmasters or speaking out in public. So, everybody has these different skills. And I think that's where this kind of comes into the training and development. So some important material within this checklist are more related to conducting needs assessments. So kind of understanding the needs of your employees and what is required for their training. Creating inclusive content. So, not focusing just on one type of content that kind of benefits one type of employee. Trainer diversity, very important to have different types of trainers, not just one type of trainer. Training accessibility, so making sure it's open to everybody and different, in written, verbal, in written, in every type of way that you can, video if possible. And then unconscious bias training, I think, is huge. And you guys have done that now, so you're good. You can check that off the list. But unconscious bias training is really important, kind of just to understand those unconscious kind of biases that are coming in. And then cultural competency training and just continuous learning. So our checklist will kind of focus on some points all within that. The fourth checklist is performance management. So performance management is key for succession planning and for making sure that your organization is getting top ROI and return on, basically their human capital. So from a human resources side, we want to make sure that employees are performing at their top notch. Integrating diversity, equity, and inclusion principles into performance management is essential for promoting fairness, transparency, and employee growth. I think some of the key indicators for the performance management idea checklist include having clear performance criteria. So I think that's a big one, really big one. Making sure that the goals of each employee and what they're supposed to achieve in that role is very clearly well defined. If you have a well-defined performance management plan or at least goals to start off with and kind of what needs to be achieved, then you have basically built in diversity, equity, inclusion, because you need to kind of reach those goals based on that individual, and you need to kind of adapt to that individual. You want to make sure that they're in your performance management kind of plan, that you're mitigating bias in evaluation, providing equal access to opportunities. So again, I think equal access is a funny word to use there, but equitable access we should probably have to all opportunities. So making sure that everybody has the opportunity to reach the training that they need or the performance that they need to reach their goals. So, that could mean in-person training, it could mean online training, it could mean in a course from the University of Calgary. There's different types of training available and everybody's different. So it's important to kind of help ensure that they're on the right kind of mindset and focusing their skill enhancement on the goals that are set out by the performance reviews. Inclusive performance reviews. Make sure that the employee is involved in the review. Don't just hand them a text and say, this is a C, a D, an A, a B, whatever it might be for a score. Make sure that you're having conversations and they're understanding where they're lacking and where improvement is needed, and they're understanding where they're doing well and where the successes are. And I think from that mindset, for performance management, it's essential to have leaders who understand different cultural competencies and different biases and different intersectionalities, because then you have a strong, diverse team, and it's going to be a lot better for your organization in the long run. Finally, for checklists, we've got business development. So I would just say under business development, this is kind of thinking more along the lines of growing your organization and ensuring that it's adapting with the times. So infusing diversity, equity, and inclusion into your business strategy is a holistic approach that can lead to long-term success, innovation, and positive social impact. Some of the core principles included on the IDA business development checklist are leadership, commitment, and buy-in. So very difficult to get anything done without your organization's leadership, commitment, and buy-in. There are strategies on that, and we'd be happy to discuss that. It's probably, again, a whole nother, conversation, but I would be happy to chat with anybody who has questions about how to kind of engage their leadership. Because you do need that buy-in in order to implement these policies. Making sure you have a well-defined goal in any business development, that's essential. And we kind of talked a little bit about that with performance development of individuals, but this is more from a business strategy approach. So, defining and aligning your idea goals with your business strategy. I think that's essential. So you're going to want to look at it from your organization's perspective. What is your mission statement? What are your vision? What are you looking to accomplish, and how can you incorporate DEI and idea into that, and why? And why is it important? And hopefully we kind of touched on that today. So really bringing out that inclusive environment where diverse thought can really bring new ideas and new, basically, return on investment of that human capital. So also within business development, I think it's important to look at inclusive marketing and communication. So make sure you're not just targeting specific communities or, specific messages. Try to be diverse. It's a lot of talking. Sorry, my mouth's getting dry. So I also like here on business development focusing on supplier diversity. And I think that's understated a lot. Who are your suppliers and who are you selling to, and how can you diversify your supplier base? That's not only good for your business. I mean, within reason, I think there's business strategy depending on your, your fiscals and everything, but it's also great for diversifying, your own kind of product and your own what you're putting out there. If you can have multiple and diverse stakeholders in any organization, that's usually a good thing. And promoting continuous growth through education, and for me that's a big one. Continuing to learn in DEI and IDEA, and to continue to make it a part of the conversation. A lot of people, a lot of organizations do just kind of check the checklist, and we created the checklist as an audit, but the idea is to really get it going and get that conversation started. We also have, if you're interested, we do have like DEI kind of consultation where we can help you set up your strategy with core pillars that align to your business, your sort of business goals and your vision and mission statements. So, continuing to grow, continuing to learn is essential, I think, especially in today's age where information is coming in so quickly, so fast. You can access anything at any time, and then within that day, someone else has a different opinion on it. So, I think it's just important to continue to adapt. Okay, so on the next slide, we're getting pretty close, which is actually good. So we'll have some time to have some questions at the very end. But I think what I really want to discuss here, and this is more of a conversation side, is what can we do to identify and commit to actions moving forward? So how can we continue to ensure that DEI and IDEA practices are implemented and moving forward as we build our businesses and as we support our communities as well. And I think once the issue has been acknowledged within the organization, you can try to increase buy-in from stakeholders. And one of the kind of main tips to do this is to start at the top. And that's kind of what I was talking about before with your leadership. So it's just absolutely crucial that leadership is on board. So have those conversations and make sure that they are bought in. And whatever that looks like in your organization, it might be different. All leaders are different. Some are more hands-on, some are less hands-on, but there has to be buy-in regardless of what that buy-in looks like. Educate and raise awareness. So conduct training sessions and workshops to help educate all employees. Conduct recruitment training sessions for managers. That's essential. If they're hiring people, they should have these skills. They should be aware of what a bias is and how that bias could implement their decision. Obviously that could be difficult. Everybody is busy as well, but I think it is really important when your managers are making those decisions and bringing people into the organization. They have to know about this. They have to be informed and trained. So educate and raise awareness. Communicate the why. So kind of like, what I tried to do at the beginning of this presentation, clearly articulate the reasons behind implementing IDEA practices, and then emphasize that it's not just about compliance or meeting the requirements, but about building stronger, more innovative and resilient organizations. So, why are we doing this? Why for each topic, recruitment, performance management, whatever it is. And again, I can go into a lot more detail on those, but I kind of just wanted to highlight the why of why those are important. Showcase your success stories. I think this is a really big one in any business environment. So leaders want to see success, managers want to see success, employees want to see success, everybody wants to see success. So, make sure that you're showcasing when you have successful DEI strategies or policies that you've implemented and that you've seen have created return on investment, and maybe a great idea that wouldn't have been showcased without kind of your IDEA practices in place, maybe that came to fruition and really was a win for the company. So, really try to show and highlight those successes, especially ones that recognize or reward inclusive behavior. So align your organizational values, again, like I talked about earlier, your mission statement, your vision, your goals. Align this with your DEI practices and policies in a way that they can grow together. I think that's really important, and reevaluate. Don't just don't sit on it after 2 years and say we did it in 2024 and it's now 2027 maybe. We don't have to look at it. That's not the way it works, right? We have to always update. We have to always kind of add to it. So I think as your organization changes and your mission and vision change, if they do, make sure your policies and DEI practices are changing as well. And then use data. So if you can, try to use data. Smaller organizations, I know a lot of times it's like me on my spreadsheet, that's the data, how we get the data. But try to use as much data as you can and utilize that data to kind of help identify strategies, gaps, whether that's succession planning, performance management, whatever it might be. Where you can kind of use DEI and DI policies to fill those gaps as well. Review all your policies as we're talking about policies. Make sure that those policies are inclusive. We can always help with that at Eco Canada. We can do policy audits, policy creation. Our HR services team is really great with that kind of stuff. But you can also do it on your own. If you kind of go through and audit your policies and look for wording, look for different ways of phrasing things. Make sure you have a DEI policy in place. A lot of organizations don't, and it's more. It's also good from the organizational standpoint to kind of not cover your bases with policy, but make sure it's there, right? You want to make sure that you have these in place so that you can say no, according to this policy, and then you can state the policy, which is a great policy, hopefully. Another thing that you can do within your organization to kind of commit to IDEA and to commit to inclusiveness within the organization is to establish employee resource groups, or ERGs. ERGs can be a powerful way to foster a sense of belonging and provide a platform for employees to connect with others who share similar backgrounds or interests. So you could have, within an organization, if it's large enough, you might have like a grassroots kind of committee. You might have just different committees or action kind of items where people can get together and chat about different things. Obviously, you want to have someone from HR or the organization there so that it doesn't get, you want it to be a productive growth experience, but not just a gripe session, I guess. But you want to, it's important that people feel heard and that they have a platform to voice those actions. Finally, I think, we touched on this kind of throughout, but make sure that you're continually evaluating your policies. Make sure that you are checking in on those biases from an organizational standpoint. Is there anything that the organization can do to kind of help raise awareness with employees and continuously improve their policies in order to, mitigate those biases and to help provide kind of I guess a platform in which DEI and IDEA can really spring from and really survive. So that's kind of the main points that I wanted to discuss today. And it was a lot. I think it was a great discussion though, and kind of a good theoretical understanding, hopefully, of what IDEA is, and then some action items that you can really commit to and take with you and kind of go through. So at the end here, I'll definitely post where you can access the checklist. I'd love it if you just even check out the checklist. They're there for you and they're free. So I think they're free. Yeah, they're free. And you can access them and use them to springboard your audit, I guess, and kind of look at that. If you do have any questions for me, or if you want to reach out to me for HR services at all, I will put my email in the chat, or I can just give it to you. It's ajanzic, so AJANZIC @eco.ca. Again, Andrew Janzik, and happy to reach out on LinkedIn, email, anything that works for you. And I'd be happy to talk about HR services and how we might be able to help further with either DEI training, policy formulation, or really anything else. So on the next slide, Chase, if you don't mind, I think we just have our thank you. So yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today and for taking the time to listen to me chat about DEI and business strategy, and how it can really actually help your business in the long run, and why it's important not just for the employee, but also from the organization standpoint. So thank you so much, and I'll be here for questions. If anybody wants to ask questions, I'll be sticking around.
There's one question that came in here, Andrew. Do you have any tips on the wording for job postings, internal policies to appeal to diverse audiences and encourage equity deserving groups to apply, feel included?
Yeah, great question. I know there's a lot of software out there now where you can actually pop it into the software too. I don't personally use it. I find I like to kind of do my own writing. So for tips, I would just say try to keep everything neutral. Obviously, I always just avoid any kind of he her wording. I think that's pretty obvious. But making sure that when you're wording questions and when you're phrasing things, that they're really kind of focusing on competencies and tasks, and not something that would be irrelevant to that competency or task, I guess. So it's kind of vague, I know, but you can use AI. I mean, you could actually prompt probably ChatGPT to write a proper DEI from a DEI lens, but I think I always prefer to write my own anyway. But yeah, just think about it and just be relevant in the moment when you're creating those questions, and think, how can I reach out to different groups? And then where you're posting it, I think, is big too for accessibility. Make sure it's going on to different types of job boards, maybe even printed if you have to in different organizations, and printed in and posted on community boards and stuff like that. So kind of thinking about different ways, and even sometimes old school ways.
Awesome. Another question here is, where can I find the checklist you're referring to?
Yeah, let me find it. Do I have access to the chat, Chase? Yeah.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
And then as well as there's another question here asking, what about the role of ERGs, employee resource groups, in an organization?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that. I think it's really important to have ERGs set up. So it provides that platform where for people to be heard. And I think that is essential for, so I'm doing another thing here, trying to find the checklist, but I think it is essential for organizations to have that. So whether it's formal or whether it's informal, it kind of depends on the organization, probably the size of the organization. But yeah, very important to have those resource groups. It could be even external, possibly, if the organization is big enough or wants that kind of thing. So any platform that allows employees to voice their opinion, even if it isn't heard. I know at my work, like obviously I love to talk, I'll voice my opinion, and I don't even really care if they take it, as long as I have a solid understanding of why they didn't take it, right? So just that communication, I think, is really important, and those ERGs allow employees to communicate, as long as it's with receptive leadership, I guess, and with receptive organization members. Sorry, just finding the checklist. Any other questions at all? Nope.
One more just came in. How can we extend IDEA to our interactions with our clients/customers?
Sorry, one more time.
How can we extend IDEA to our interactions with our clients/customers?
Yeah, so less internal, more external. So I like that. This one is this training is probably a little more focused on the internal side, but I think we touched a little bit on it with the diversification of your clients. When you're thinking about dealing with clients, I think it's similar as to employees in a way, right? You want to make sure that you are listening to diverse thoughts, not just shutting them down, or making sure that they're heard. And then again, like I said in the last answer, kind of communicating why if you can't accommodate that. Understanding that maybe when someone makes a decision on their end, it is due to their circumstances. It's not due to they don't like you or something like that. It's actually due to whatever intersection they're coming from, throughout A, their whole life, and then B, that month, that week, that day, whatever's happening, what they're reacting to in their business. So, understanding that kind of bias and I guess intersectionality comes into play with almost all human decisions, not just business decisions. So I think that's a big one.
And then, do you have any strategies for internal training? I find a lot of training regarding DEI/biases, etc., is a repeated information that can cause employees to tune out. Obviously, it is very important to share, but sometimes it seems like it isn't internalized, meaningful/impactful.
Yeah, no, excellent point. I think it's DEI as a topic too is, I mean, it's a little bit oversaturated right now. So, but it's so important. I think that's why, right? So I think for that question, if you can really focus on maybe what I would call like a sharp session. So one per year, something that just highlights why it's so important and that you're still continuing. One thing that you could also do, so that would be like an internal lunch and learn. Sorry, I jumped ahead there, but it could be an internal lunch and learn, just one sharp session that really focuses on the basics. Stick with, the same wording, DEI. I know it's confusing. I use IDEA, DEI, all these different things. Internally, I'm just sticking with DEI because it's just less confusing. So, just simplify it and really make it about not about emotions and about that, but why it's important for your role and important for your job and important for the business. So, just quick sessions like that. And then I was also going to say, having a DEI policy in place, at least that people can access, just have it, in your policies. People can see it, and they have questions they can ask your HR. And if you really want to go the extra mile, you could do a DEI survey. So, kind of get a feel for how DEI is trending within the organization right now and how people feel about it. I know it's oversaturated a lot, so I almost would avoid the survey for now, but totally up to you. Okay, I found the checklist. Sorry, one second. Oh, let's see if that works. I'm not sure if that'll work. It's on the ECO website though, so I can guide you to it if you like. Let me know if that works first, the extension. Any other questions while Was anybody able to access that PDF? Still there, Chase?
Yeah, Andrew, I just messaged you in the chat on Teams. If you just want to send me that link that way on the website, and I'll post it and make sure that does work.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Someone said, do you have an example of EDI policy or a template?
Yeah, so we do have a EDI or DI basically strategy template, but we do offer that as part of our consulting packages. So I could definitely, if you wanted to reach out to me, I could maybe have a look and see kind of what you're looking at. I could possibly send it, but I know it is usually a paid service for that one. Yeah, the template's good. The DEI strategy template that we have, basically, I'll give you a little hint of kind of what it is. So we have a DEI statement, and you kind of create a statement for your organization. And then you will have 3 different pillars under DEI that you can really focus on. I can't give you the names of the pillars without giving away too much, but you can then kind of go through it and set up different KPIs and goals. And it's great because it really does highlight your kind of DEI strategy from an internal perspective.
Awesome. So I'm thinking maybe, Andrew, after we end the webinar, I'll get you to send along all those links, and I can send those out to all the attendees in the email just so they have those, make it a little more accessible for them, if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, I can send the checklists for sure, yeah.
Perfect,
and
awesome.
Then links on how to access our HR services as well.
Perfect, awesome. Thank you very much, Andrew. And I think that's it for questions. So thank you everyone for joining,
Awesome.
And hopefully we'll see you around again. Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining. Okay, take care.